I was just watching a video by Thomas Sheridan, which I will link, or I'll attempt to link below. I'll also link it on I've already put it on my Facebook and Twitter. And it only was just released today, and Thomas was talking about how there is a dark mood over the country at present. He's certainly right, and the timeline that he described was exactly the one that fitted in for me. Since March of this year, I've been sticking to the principle operated by John Lydon, or Johnny Rotten, as he was known. John Lydon's a really, really clever, switched-on, clued-in guy. He called bullshit, and indeed called perversity and paedophilia, on Jimmy Savile in the 1970s. Accordingly, he wasn't exactly part of that inner set who Jimmy Savile became central to in the late 1970s and all through the 1980s. Those of us who are a bit older, I'm 47, can remember how Jimmy Savile was this very, very, very big star on British television. But what's interesting, and anybody who reflects upon it will agree immediately with what I say, Jimmy Savile was never on ITV. Ever. Did you ever see Jimmy Savile on ITV? He was a BBC head. He lived in Television Centre in Shepherd's Bush. He was not part of ITV because up to the end of the 1980s, anybody who knows their history of British television will know that ITV, there wasn't such a thing as ITV. It was individual licence holders like Thames Television for London weekday programming and London Weekend Television for London Weekend programming. There was Granada for Greater Manchester. There was Yorkshire Television. There was Central Television for the Midlands, which had previously been ATV. There was TVS Television South to the South and South East. So ITV could not be said to exist in that same singular centralised mass that the BBC did. Nobody on ITV touched Jimmy Savile, and there was a reason for that. They didn't say it, but you never ever saw Savile being promoted on ITV or by those broadcasters or franchise holders that I just named, all of whom are now gone. Savile was a darling of the BBC, and Johnny Rotten called bullshit on him in 1978 and paid a dear price for it. The way anybody who's a whistleblower, but also a whistleblower ahead of their time, does. Oh, they pay a dear price for it. I'm sure Johnny Rotten doesn't care, because he's a very hard man as well. Even though he's older now, he's still a very hard man. He doesn't have quite the same angular manner that he had in his 20s. You know, he's more convivial somewhat. He hasn't changed. And that's why I have such respect for him. He's a man I'd love to spend half an hour sitting talking with. John Lydon, in a recent book of his that I read, or a book of his that I read recently, said that all conflict is about money. That's right. Dig deep enough, it's always about money. And he's right, totally right. So the COVID-19 thing that we're going through is about money. Thomas Sheridan and myself, and people will have to recognise this as we're heading into November now. February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October. We're now 9 months into this. And my position, and I'm boasting slightly, I don't want to toot my horn too loudly here, I've been completely consistent from the start of all of this. I've said this is horseshit from the start. Anybody who looks back at my posts, anybody who looks back at anything I've said, I have not in any way wavered from my position that I took in late February of this year. Indeed, I was on a holiday at the time down in Mayo on my own in a hotel. People were beginning to talk about it. I said, "Oh, you mean this flu? This seasonal flu?" And, you know, I said, "Blues kill." I did not think. I knew something was coming. But I knew something was coming from a long, long time ago. I could see that, for instance, since 2001 in Ireland, all initiatives by the government have been about reducing freedom. Now, you can be part of all of that tinfoil hat brigade who talk about common law courts and all the rest of it, but that's bollocks. But what is happening legitimately through statute is every new piece of statute is about reducing people's freedoms. They've been doing that for a long time. They became more earnest about it in 2009, and they became particularly more fanatical about it in 2011. I can talk about it on another occasion. But the purpose of this particular video is to make the point. I've been aware that a big event is coming. And this is not it. Yet. Because it's still only in October. And we have to wait and see what November is going to be like. Because if you like October, November is going to be a fucking blast. One of the memes that I've been putting up since March is watch November. Watch November. Watch November. And one of the consistent messages that I've had in those memes that I've put up is that indebted middle class is going to hit the wall in November. I have not seen anything between February and now to suggest anything otherwise to me. In fact, what I'm watching is that all of the kind of runes and auguries that I had begun to see from long before February this year, but beginning to really take shape late February and then into March, they've all come true. That sounds very boastful on my part. I don't want to be one of those kind of armchair lawyers who says, well, I predicted this, and I predicted that, and wait till I tell you, when's the golf club bar closing? Is it, oh no, sure, listen, I'll go up and I'll ask Malachi to give us a late one. Yes, I think actually the election is Biden's to lose. That's actually what I heard some cunt saying in Hoth. I think the election actually, it's Biden's to lose. I didn't say anything to him. There's no point in talking to these ones. They're not human. What's the point? What's the point in getting into an argument with a fucking agent like that? Really? It's quite clear. I'm reading the Irish Times and just watching RTE. I'm even laughing thinking about this asswiping Hoth. This geezer in his late 60s who probably was a stalwart of the golf club. Wonder how he's going to pay those fees after November. Well, it says it on RTE, and I read it was this in-depth article in the Irish Times. I had to go looking for it between all the promotions of Phoebe and Joseph and all the race baiting. But anyway, the election is Biden's to lose. It's Biden, it's... and they always do that. The election is Biden's to lose. I felt like I would have really liked to say to him, Biden has dementia and you're not fucking far behind him, you golf club old cunt. But I hadn't the heart. Well, I would have had the heart, but I just wasn't fucking bothered. I would have had the heart. I would have quite easily said that to him. Quite easily, I would have said that to him. But anyway, Thomas was talking in his most recent video, just released today. Thomas does great videos. I particularly like it when Thomas does impressions of normies or Glenn Hansard. That made me fall off the bed laughing when I was looking at one of his impressions of Glenn Hansard. I don't know why it is. Intellectually, I can't understand why when Thomas does all these particularly the voices he does of normies. It just breaks my ass off laughing. Thomas does all that kind of thing. I give myself a pain in my guts laughing when Thomas does all of those normie voices. I won't imitate it here because I don't want to make him self-conscious. He'll probably listen to this video though, but hey, shit, Anyway, Thomas is talking about November. I've been talking about November for a long, long time now. But it's going to be serious. Today, in my home in Hoth, where I live with my mother and father, I saw 2 large dogs in my back garden, running wild in the back garden. So I went out to the beach. I said, are those dogs yours? She said, will you bring them out to me? I said, go in and get them. I said, and I won't actually go into particular details about precisely how I articulated it. But I made it very clear to the woman that it would be in her interest and the dog's interest not to come into my garden again. And we'll leave it at that. I think that's a good enough way to describe it. And this woman was not apologetic about having 2 dogs on the beach off a lead that ran into a private garden of a home. I could have had a baby in the garden. I could have had animals, rabbits or things in the garden. This is what you're dealing with, a cross of undereducated, underbred, NPC, normie who has spent their life drinking Fanta and eating fried Mars bars. And there's generations of that. Generations of it. After the 9th of February this year, I've spoken about it elsewhere, I gave up on people. I just stopped worrying about that kind of individual. I stopped worrying. They're not my problem. But when their fucking dogs come into my garden, and she said she was a dog walker, I said, I don't fucking care if you're a moonwalker. Those dogs come into my garden, you're in charge of them, you've the problem, not me. But this is something Thomas actually mentioned. I was freaked out by it in his video today. People making intrusions into your property and not knowing. I mean, a normal individual would have said, I'm terribly sorry, I let the dogs off the lead, or they broke the lead by accident. I will come in and remove them immediately, and I'll make sure it doesn't happen again. That's a normal individual. Whereas this thing demanded that I bring them out to her. Well, again, I won't go into too many details about exactly the conversation, but I didn't really make any guarantees about the state that they would be in when I brought them out to her. Because, first of all, I love dogs, so I'm not afraid of them. And dogs know when somebody's not afraid. They know. Dogs are pagans, you know. Hey, dogs know shit. I've come across dogs that are cleverer than people I've met. Anybody who knows dogs will agree with me in 2 seconds. You will meet dogs that are more intelligent than some of the human beings you'll come across. Anybody who knows dogs will... That's not an exaggeration. But dogs know when they're on somebody's territory, because dogs are terribly territorial. Even bitches are. But dogs, particularly the males, are particularly territorial. And they know when they've gone into strange territory. They know when you're not afraid of them, and they know when it's yours. Oh, and they watch them fucking run. It doesn't matter how big they are, how vicious or aggressive they are. You're dealing with animals. Once you know the buttons to press, you can control dogs. Suffice it to say, they left the garden quickly enough. But this returns to what Thomas was saying. There are these people, or no, I'm using the word charitably. There are these ones out there, and we're now in a very strange psychic time, and he's right. He analysed it in his video. I won't explain, but his analysis, in my opinion, bears a lot of weight. Certainly, the timeline of events that Thomas described, absolutely, I witnessed it personally myself, is completely accurate. Absolutely 100% accurate in his description of the timeline. Get ready for a lot more of this. Trump's going to win. It's going to be something similar, I predict, to what happened to Jeremy Corbyn. I believe it's most likely that in this instance, Trump is going to win the popular vote as well as the Electoral College. November 2020. You see, this mainstream media, when they deal with the US presidential election, something that they're very uncomfortable with is one of the biggest and most fundamental and earliest features of the United States Constitution, the Electoral College. The President of the United States is not elected by a popular vote across the Union. He is elected by a vote within each state. The state then sends delegates to the Electoral College. The Electoral College conducts the presidential election in December, and those votes are then sent to Congress. Congress ratifies it in January, and that's when it's confirmed whoever will be president. A situation has never arisen in the United States where, when the Electoral College sends its votes to Congress, that Congress has vetoed that and said, go back and choose somebody else. This actually indicates something. The President of the United States is chosen by Congress. They're not chosen by a democratic election because Congress has the final say on who gets to be the president. That was why, in the 2000 election, Gore knew he hadn't a leg to stand on constitutionally against Bush. That was why. And once the Supreme Court said Bush had won Florida, it was over for Gore. And to Gore's credit, he threw his hand in immediately. He didn't fuck around after that. Congress chooses the President of the United States. It was designed by the Founding Fathers to be similar to Britain. After the Restoration in the 1600s, those who were allowing the monarchy to restore itself in Britain were determined that they would never return to a tyrannical king like Charles I. So when the monarchy was allowed to be restored in Great Britain, one of the most fundamental features of the Acts of Settlement, which happened at the end of the 1600s and early 1700s, really, one of the most fundamental was the Acts of Settlement took place over a considerable amount of time as the system and Parliament was adjusting itself to having the monarchy restored, the monarchy having been removed by Cromwell. But one of the most fundamental features and earliest features of the Restoration in Great Britain was that Parliament has the right to remove the monarch at any time for any reason by a simple vote. So the United States system was inspired by that. Now, Congress does not have the right to sack the president. It has the right to impeach him, whereby the privileges of the presidency are removed. But it would take a very, very big vote of Congress. I'm not sure the exact procedure in place in the US for Congress to remove the president, but there is a procedure there. There absolutely is a procedure there, because the founding fathers of the US watched very carefully what had happened with the Acts of Settlement in Great Britain and the need to have a procedure in place for Parliament to assert its authority. So this means that in Britain, the most powerful institution in Great Britain is Parliament. And in the United States, the most powerful institution actually is Congress. Congress can remove the president. Congress can hold the president to account, including by impeachment and other means. Congress, if we look at the impeachment of Trump that happened, I think, earlier this year, that was disgraceful, and that was actually a travesty and an abusive process. Congress could easily have just passed a vote of censure. We condemn what you're doing, but we're not going to take any action. But we, as the sovereign parliament of the sovereign federal assembly of the United States, they don't refer to themselves as a parliament. It's not. Congress is somewhat different from being a parliament. You wouldn't call it a parliament in the way that you would, say, even in Ireland or in Britain. You'd more call it a national assembly, a bicameral national assembly. Congress could easily have just passed a vote of censure against Trump. No. They went down the impeachment route, and all they did was make him stronger. They sealed his victory. But let's get back to Ireland. Let's stop talking about American politics for a sec, although it's so fascinating and Trump is so great at what the fuck he does. Trump is just ripping it up. And that's because Trump doesn't want to be a messiah. He does not have a messiah complex, unlike that lunatic, craven psychopath Obama. At least with Joe Biden, one of the protections, hypothetically, if Biden were to win, which is not going to happen, that's RTE and all the woke media talking it up, not going to happen. But one of the checks and balances and protections against Biden is the fact that he's already fucking lost his marbles. RTE won't tell you that. RTE wants Biden to win. I have to praise RTE for their frankness. They're not even pretending to be objective or balanced. Their candor has to be congratulated. RTE is promoting Biden. That is because RTE is immersed in the Clinton Foundation. One of the protections of Biden, though, of course, is the fact that he's already lost his mind. So, he won't be that dangerous in office if he were to get him. He won't. It's not going to happen. Not going to happen. Anyway. It is serious what's coming in November, because people, Thomas and I were saying in March, it's not going to go back to the way it was, March and April. All these people, I remember these wankers were saying, I can't do that accent. I'm good at accents, but I can't actually do that particular Dublin middle class, man aged between 25 and 45 accent. I'm not able to do it. I've never been able to do that accent. Maybe it's because they're just entities you can't empathise with, really. Well, I've been sitting at home, trying to do it now. Sitting at home, and we've been getting the few beers in, we've been getting the few, and the Netflix, we've been getting the Netflix in, but sure, I'll be back to my IT business by May or June at the latest. Well, how did that one turn out for you, you daft, fat, beery, overweight cunt? How did that one work out for you, you fucking Fine Gael, Varadkar, falating fucking moron? Ah, yes, bring the flames. Ah, fucking hell. Oh, they deserve it, these ones. Oh, Jesus. Actually, Simon's playing a blinder.
Excuse me.
Of course he is. Of course he is. I'm on the dole. You know what? By the end of November, I'll be in the fucking first class in comparison to fucking wank stains like that. All these ones with their IT businesses, all these ones with their crystal businesses, all these ones who are in debt with mortgages, car loans, all the rest of it, they're in big, 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 big trouble. There's going to be suicides, there's going to be killings, there's going to be violence, and it's a dangerous time ahead, and it's not to be flippant about. It's not to be flippant about. We need, and it was a change that happened to me on the 9th of February this year when I saw that the Irish people had decided to let 35 Fine Gael TDs back in. Well, I said, you're on your own now. I care for my own tribe. That is my very immediate family, and actually the very, very many great friends that I've made on social media. I started making great friends around 2014 with Irish Water. I met some brilliant, brilliant people with Irish Water. I met some fucking ace people with Irish Water. We're all still in touch. I met some of the best people in the world around Irish Water. We're all still in touch. They're my tribe. Oh, if you don't wear a mask either, you're my tribe. Automatically, you're my tribe. If you don't wear a mask, cool. You're in the club if you don't wear my tribe. If you don't wear a mask, you're in my tribe. But it's going to be dangerous. And the police in Ireland, the Guard, they are very, very deeply stretched at the moment, dealing with making sure that people don't buy underpants and that kind of thing. It's interesting to see how far they will allow themselves to be pushed, because do the guards really want to be in a hostile relationship with people who want to buy underpants? You know. And certainly there's going to be a lot of turbulence in November, and this is the time. Really, there's going. It is somewhat. Thomas made a comparison with Anne Frank, the people who dobbed Anne Frank in, and they were acting within the law. Don't forget that by the law of Germany and the Third Reich, the Holocaust was legal. Don't forget that. Discriminating against Jews was legal. Creating ghettos is legal. The people who perpetrated the Holocaust were not breaking the law. They were tried in Nuremberg for crimes against humanity, rightly so. But by the standards of the Third Reich, they were not breaking the law. And again, we analysed this back in August. The mask thing was a shit test. It still is. It was a shit test. A total, utter, 100% with bells on, flames coming out of the top, shit test. And it was very sad in many regards to see those who fell for it. In all seriousness, I would go to jail indefinitely rather than being forced to wear a mask, and I'm not exaggerating that. And I think in the way that those two dogs running around my garden saw today that I wasn't bullshitting, I think a lot of people know that in relation to masks, I'm not bullshitting either. But that was a test, and it demoralised people. My own mother said, who's 90, my mum said, you know, it's about creating submission and complete, and I forget the word she used, but submission. She said it's degrading. She said people are being, the way she put it is, they're being mocked and made a fool of. She said they're like, you know, she described them as people being made line up to dance, you know, like in a Western, dance, like that. And that's what it is like. It's these people are being made a mockery. Well, they're not people, they're being made a mockery of. And it was only a foretaste of what's coming in November, and it's going to be very turbulent, and it's going to take a long time. Thomas again drew the analogy that with the Great War, everyone was told by the mainstream media, the incipient, the nascent mainstream media back in 1914, it'll be over by Christmas. Well, how did that turn out? And it's the same here. This is the long haul here, guys. This is the long haul, and anything can happen. Anything can happen. I'm not saying that to alarm people. Dave Cullen, who's great. I think Dave Cullen is great, but one of the problems with Dave Cullen, although he is great, and I have great regard for the detail he goes into and the thoroughness of his material. I just sit here farting into a microphone. Dave Cullen does work. Dave Cullen actually works with his videos. But a criticism, and it's made mildly, of Dave is that he's pessimistic. Thomas is not pessimistic. I'm not pessimistic. In many regards, this is a wonderful time to be alive because we're watching shibboleths like RTE and the Irish Times collapse up their own assholes. And I mean, I never thought I'd live to see the day. I never, ever, ever thought I'd live to see the day that RTE would just fall down in flames around itself the way it is. You know, RTE has become synonymous with lies. And the Irish Times has become synonymous with race baiting. But the Irish Times has to get money from advertising. So when people put that centre page ad, that full page ad in the centre of it 2 weeks ago about COVID-19, the Irish Times had to take it. That had been 30,000 for them possibly. They can't turn that down. They can't turn that down. Miriam Lord's pension won't pay for itself. So, you know. And that's the distinction between the Irish Times and RTE. RTE is always kept on life support by the government. That won't be forever either. That won't be forever either. And RTE is in danger because there is a shifting perception and a shifting but also crystallising perception that RTE is telling lies and is propagating a myth. That is much more crystallised now than it was 6 weeks ago. It'll be interesting to see how it is 6 weeks from now at the end of November.